This is Chuck Edson with Kiva's Corner, also known as Kiva Circle if we get our private nonprofit status. Here is Kiva Sugarman, and we're here today to talk to our anyway, our courageous museum director, Todd Kepple, who is here today, and to talk to us about Mr. Sugarman. And his time, the man and his times. And really appreciate Todd coming in here. I've known Todd for more than 20 years and helped me on some other projects. He's a civic-minded guy, I think, in the spirit of Mr. Sugarman here.
That's a great compliment. Thank you.
Thank you. And this small project we're trying to get started here also honors the man, and we've definitely taken over his motto or slogan, "I ain't mad at nobody." We'll talk a little more about that, but first of all, wanted to add a sad note here. I know many local viewers may know, I just learned today, sadly, that Chuck Wells died a week ago today. Todd and Chuck Wells were very good friends, and he was a very much public service man, and his wife Sally as well. And Todd, I thought we'd start this with a little opportunity to you to speak to Chuck Wells.
Oh, I appreciate that. That's very appropriate. I think Chuck and Sally, both dear people, loved by many people in town, and both very prominent Democrats, but still held in high regard by many people in town of any political persuasion. And so I think that speaks a lot to who Chuck was and how he kind of rose above all of sometimes the strife that we see in politics. Even recently, he could never be made to be angry about anything, just always very even-tempered, and really just an institution in the community was Chuck Wells.
Yeah, I only got to know him in the last year or so, and it was kind of a humbling experience to be around him. It was like being in the presence of a philosopher or definitely another kind of person. And I have tried to adopt Mr. Sugarman's motto and control my anger. It's a challenge.
Well, I got to visit with Chuck just a few days before he passed, and I told him that nobody could ever fill his shoes in this town, but that a number of us would try to team up and carry on his spirit, and so we'll just do the best we can.
Todd, here we go.
All right.
There we go. We'll
Good.
accept that.
That's good too.
Accept that. Thank you. So let's maybe we can begin a little bit with Mr. Sugarman's, Kiva's history, and I think you could fill us in on that better than I can.
Well, I don't know. You studied Kiva's history, and I have too. I've gotten to where I can't retrieve facts like I used to in my younger years. But Kiva has definitely been one of my favorite figures in local history because of, not just because of the slogan, but because of the way he did business and conducted himself in the community. And his story, born in a family of modest means in Romania, his father engaged in business, but not a wealthy man, and so Kiva struck out on his own, came to America around 1901, if I remember right. Does that sound
right around
That's
there.
about right. And supposedly had $6.50 in his pocket when he landed in New York. And then had an uncle in Portland, so he made his way all the way across the country in those days and landed in Portland and was there for a few years. And then for whatever reason, he settled on Klamath Falls as the place where he wanted to go. And so in 1906, he came here. Klamath Falls was still pretty much a horse and buggy town at that time. We didn't have a railroad yet. Very poor roads, hardly an automobile had, the first automobile seen in Klamath Falls was 1906. So, in those days when people came to Klamath Falls, they came by railroad part of the way and then by stagecoach and maybe even by steamboat to get to Klamath Falls, and that's when Sugarman arrived, before the town had really begun its boom period.
You know, as you're talking, that was probably also true of Medford and maybe Bend. I mean, I wouldn't be surprised if they weren't about as remote as we were.
Bend to some degree, but Medford was on the main north-south highway, the Pacific Highway, and so Medford, the railroad had been in the Rogue Valley for, like 20 years by then, so they got a head start on us that way. But getting to Klamath Falls, even just from Medford or, Wairika, California, it was a bit of an adventure to get here.
Yeah, this area enjoyed quite a bit of popularity, I think, for its wilderness recreational opportunities, fishing and probably other things, and also economic. But that probably came during Kiva's lifetime when it really started to grow here, I imagine.
Yeah, the fishing, especially up on the Williamson River and the Wood River, attracted a lot of folks from the Bay Area, more so than Portland even.
And do you know anything about the circumstances in Europe or Romania at the time that Kiva moved? I mean, I don't. I just wondered if you had any insights there.
I don't either, other than, what I read in a history that had been written up about Kiva Sugarman was that he was looking for opportunity, and America seemed to be the place where people were coming to find that opportunity. So in New York, he didn't get established there. He couldn't afford to travel across the country to visit his uncle in Portland, and so he, the story is that he had to borrow money from someone, and it took him a while to pay it back. And something I'd like to know, Chuck, you and I discussed this earlier actually, is that when Kiva arrived here in Klamath Falls as a young Jewish man, he was, in his mid to late 20s by the time he got here in 1906, and didn't bring money with him. So he had to get established in the clothing business, and within a couple of decades became one of the prominent businessmen on Main Street. I wouldn't say he was like one of the wealthy businessmen. He and his wife lived in a modest home over on Lincoln Street, not up on the hill where the old money was, but over on the flats in the 800 block of Lincoln Street. The home's still there, and it's a pretty modest home, and yet you can tell just by the way he dressed that he meant business. And I really love this photograph of the man. It's a great one.
Very jaunty and but serious, but he appears to be okay, pretty comfortable with himself, and kind of willing to I'm not make mockery of himself, but had an open heart or something going on with this guy, just looking at the photograph, that I really find appealing about this.
In that photo, he strikes me as being friendly and approachable, and yet self-assured. He knows who he is. And that's another thing that strikes me about Kiva, is that he was Jewish, and he was an observant Jew, even living in Klamath Falls, where there was no synagogue anywhere nearby. And yet he advertised extensively in the local newspapers. He would buy full-page ads to announce his various sales, and his biggest sale of the year was held in conjunction with the highest Jewish holiday, which is Yom Kippur. So he would announce Yom Kippur sales, the biggest sale of the year at Kiva Sugarman's. And so he did not try to hide the fact that he was Jewish, even though it must have been kind of a lonely spot for him.
Yeah, that's what I was wondering if he had any. That's something I wondered about too, that I don't know what Klamath Falls was like in those days. That, rural anywhere, I guess, has a reputation in America as having a lot of intolerance for. Do you have any knowledge or information about how any of that was for him or Jewish people at the time?
I don't really have anything to share in those early years. During World War I, tensions were high. There was a local farmer who lived out in the Olean area who was arrested on charges of sedition for apparently uttering some comment that was not supportive of the war effort. But Kiva, he was very supportive of America, very patriotic.
Oh, yeah.
And if you go back and look at his newspaper ads, they would often have a paragraph of what a great country America is, and how we all need to support the country. Let's see, there's something else I was going to mention. Oh, I was going to say that the 1920s might have been a difficult time because the Ku Klux Klan was active around the state of Oregon, and there was a local chapter of the Klan, and they were pretty open about it. There were cross burnings reported right here in Klamath Falls. There was a funeral for a Klansman, and the local members of the Klansmen attended in their robed attire. It's we have a photo of that, and it's just a chilling scene to look at. And so I imagine what it must have been like for a guy like Kiva to be here during a time like that when there's so much strife. But he just carried on with his business, and of course adopted his famous slogan that people have talked about.
You know, when about he adopted that? That was a question.
Well, one story that I've heard is that it dated back to the days when there were rangeland feuds going on, and I mean the classic rangeland feuds between cattlemen and sheepmen.
Oh, really?
Out in the Gerber block, lots of public land out there in the Gerber area with unregulated grazing. And so there was violence, there were sheep clubbings, there was at least one death that I know of a sheep rancher. And so the story I had heard is that Kiva didn't want to pick sides on anything like that. He wanted to do business with, everyone in town. And so he refused to pick sides, in that feud. But then also, just when I was freshening up my notes for our discussion today, I read where he had tried to borrow money from a friend while he was in New York, and the friend turned him down and wouldn't give him the loan. And so that was disappointing to him, but he determined that he was not going to be mad about it. And that's when he adopted the slogan, I ain't mad at nobody. So I don't know if we'll ever know for sure how it came to be, but he used it for years in his advertising. He had a sign across the front of his store that said, I ain't mad at nobody. And people remembered it for years. I moved here in 1990, and I was talking with a friend at church. He's gone now, but 20, 30 years ago. And he told me about the, businessman in town who had the slogan, I ain't mad at nobody. Well, that was 50 years after Kiva was gone. But local people still remembered, that slogan, and were repeating it.
There's something I wanted to ask your opinion about. You're a former journalist. You know that's a double negative. That literally means I'm mad at everybody. But that's not what Kiva meant. Do you have any observations about that?
Well, of course, I was raised by an aunt who was pretty much a stickler for proper English, and we learned that "ain't" ain't a word. I can remember that being said many times. But to me, it's just an indication that he wanted to be on a friendly basis with everybody and use a colloquialism that maybe isn't quite proper English, but makes everybody feel comfortable.
Yeah, and as you were talking about the animosity between the KKK and then also you went into the Western version that I wasn't aware of, the cattlemen and the sheep herders. I thought you were going to lead from the white settlers to Indians, but that's another story altogether. But I'm guessing there were like a handful of black people in the Klamath County in those times, and I'm wondering if therefore Jewish people weren't more targeted by the Klan at that time. Does that make any sense? Do you know anything about that?
I haven't studied the Klan activity a lot, but what little reading I've done on it seems to indicate that the Klan was more concerned with Catholicism in the 1920s than with on a race issue. So yeah, I don't know of any particular anti-Semitic activity around here, certainly. And we had a handful of black folks and Hispanics, but not very many. They don't show up in photos very often, and we have a little bit of history on the black community in Klamath, but not very much. It's one of the weaknesses of the way history has been done in America is that the history tended to focus on the affluent folks and those who were disadvantaged were largely forgotten in history.
There was something else I noticed recently as I was considering Kiva's history. He retired in the early 1940s, which was the beginning of World War II and the genocide in Germany and all of that. And I don't know how much any of that was known to the public at the time he retired, which I guess he would have been in his mid-60s or something then. And then he died about 10 years later. You know anything about his health and status, in that during World War II?
Yeah, well, so reports of the Holocaust were spreading by 1940.
Okay.
By 1942, I think that's when he sold his business and got ready to move for health reasons down to the Bay Area. So 1942, he would have been around 60, early 60s.
Yeah.
And then he passed, I think, at the age of 74 in 1954.
52, I think we have it here.
52. Oh,
Yeah.
there it is.
Yeah.
Got it.
Got it on the website. We got I Am Mad at Nobody. We've talked about that, but something else that I discovered maybe this morning or late yesterday was your website has an ad that he placed in there, which was June 30th, 1918, right during World War I. It's very patriotic, talking about, dressing up well for the 4th of July and stuff. But it ends with, at the very bottom, and this surprised me, I had to kind of scroll down in the Facebook, K. Sugarman, I lead, others follow. And that struck me as maybe almost arrogant or something. I mean, you and I said that. I would expect to be kind of criticized for it. Do you have any thoughts on how that might have been taken at that time, how he meant it?
Well, I guess just based on what I've known about him and read about him, he probably was setting himself up more as a trendsetter rather than trying to say that he was, egotistical in some way. Often business would say, our prices can't be beat, that sort of thing.
I lead, look at the way I dress.
Yeah.
I mean, okay, that helps me. Yeah, that looks like it would be appropriate attire today. I mean, that would be pretty classy look.
He would be the best dressed man in town, I suppose.
That's for sure.
Yeah.
I couldn't afford that hat. Glasses are, yeah.
One thing that I think is interesting about Klamath Falls is that you hardly ever see a suit these days. I was in a meeting just yesterday, and there was a guy in a three-piece suit there, and I thought, wow, you just don't see that in Klamath very often. But in the early to mid-1900s, there would have been probably hundreds, dozens of men, maybe a couple hundred men working in the downtown areas, businessmen, attorneys, shopkeepers, and they would have all been wearing suits, so there was plenty of business. And so Kiva was just one of a number of business men who catered to other businessmen with clothing, hats, and accessories.
As you know, I did some research into the Baldwin family 10, 15 years ago, and pictures from that era, people are either dressed as clearly labor or like that. I mean, often with, heavy wool, black suits. It must have been pretty uncomfortable in those days. But
yeah, now we wear our casual attire, and who knows, what we're wearing for pants or anything these days when we appear on camera.
Yeah, and youth today, they look like they're all broke because their pants are all shredded, got like Tiffany over here.
Oh, you're showing your age now.
I don't know, my granddaughter, 14, I just think she was living in poverty or something.
Yeah.
But, it's all in the rage. But anyway, back on to Kiva for a second here. You spoke a few minutes ago to Sally Ann Palkovich, excuse me. I know some of my granddaughters. Anyway, Palkovich. And I believe about a commemorative plaque or something for this man. I think I pointed out to you maybe 2 years ago, I looking around Sugarman's Corner and read all the bronze, brass, or whatever plaques. There's nothing about Kiva there. And I think Sally Ann and her friends are looking at trying to fix that.
Well, I've been trying to reach Sally Ann and haven't been able to reach her. I just learned that she's on her way to Spain, I guess. And so
yeah.
I actually just talked to Heidi Neal Biggs,
Oh.
who administers the Klamath Community Foundation. And so she said that there is a Sugarman's Corner fund. I probably don't have the exact name of it right, but there is a fund within the Klamath Community Foundation that people could donate to. And the hope is that someday they will be able to establish some kind of an interpretive sign or a kiosk perhaps at Sugarman's Corner that will include at least some kind of display about who Kiva Sugarman was. There's a planter at the park that says Sugarman's Corner on it, but
Yeah.
there's nothing that says who Sugarman
Right.
was. And it's such a great story that I think it
Oh,
would
yeah.
really be a nice thing to do, to have some kind of sign that tells his story.
But I would like to see that as in aluminum.
Yeah.
This guy, I don't know how you'd etch it and stuff, but I just love this portrait of the guy anyway. Yeah, and I promised you that 2 years ago I'd put $100 toward anything commemorating the guy, so I guess
Well,
I should send it to the community.
I'll tell you what, I'll match your donation, and so that'll be 200, and then just anybody else that enjoys this story, or who appreciates the fact that what had been a vacant lot for so
Yeah.
long after the Boylan building burned down, what was the name of the
Blue Ox.
tavern? The Blue Ox, yeah. Favorite spot in town for a lot of folks. And Harry Boylan, I think, had his attorney office upstairs
Oh.
in that building. But after it burned down in the 1990s, I'm not going to quote a date because I'll probably get it wrong, but I think in the early to mid 1990s is when that building burned down, and so it was just a kind of an eyesore for a while. Finally, the city acquired it and turned it into that beautiful park, and it got a great name because that's where Kiva Sugarman
Right.
had done business, and Gene Fable in later years on that corner. So the city's done a great job with very limited means to turn that into a nice little park. But in order to have some interpretation there needs to be a little bit more money scoured up. And so I think it'd be great if people could reach out to Heidi or the Klamath Community Foundation. And if they'd like, they can contact the county museum where I work, and we can put them in touch with the foundation and try to get something going.
Right, and keep it up, Heidi and Sally Ann.
Yeah, absolutely.
Well, let's move on to politics a little bit. Not going to put you on the spot here, but I know you're a conservative man, and I respect and we talked about this, you and I have worked.
Many times, yeah.
And trying to improve community relations, and something that we are for here. Something we just talked about briefly at lunch that I learned about. It's like the best kept secret in America or something. It's a political practice done in Europe, in Africa, South America, Australia, called deliberative democracy. It goes by other names, citizens forums and stuff, but the basic idea is that you form a group of citizens, kind of like a jury pool at random ideally, or people, a group of citizens that represent the population. So if you were going to do something like that in Klamath County, it would need to be, it should be something like 60-70% conservative. But people who are willing to come together, talk about an issue, focus on one thing at a time, work with a given set of the best evidence for all the different perspectives, the best arguments, discuss these matters in small groups, then come together and as a larger group and reach consensus on points. And it, the best I could tell, it works every time. And it's happened in this country. There have been examples in Ireland where they got 99 citizens together to create an initiative on abortion, and they came up They came up with one that passed by a good majority in Ireland, a very Catholic nation that includes choice. So this can work. And it's done in America. The Stanford Deliberative Democracy Lab did a huge project in 2019, I believe, during an election cycle. And it worked too, where it covered immigration, healthcare, and other divisive issues, and people reached consensus, and people's attitudes towards each other improved considerably, and 95% would do it again. And this is something that, like I say, I've been kind of trying to deal with this for a long time, and it's little heard of in this country. And but any observations on your part?
Well,
say what I want.
I wasn't familiar with the term until you introduced it to me earlier today, and so I'll be studying it myself. It seems like there's got to be a better way than what we're trying to do now in America. I've always thought of myself as moderately conservative, but lately it seems like the word conservative has been applied in situations where I think, I can't understand how that...
We just lost power. Sorry about the lights, folks.
So when I consider myself to be a conservative, that doesn't mean anything to some other folks who use the word conservative in a different construct these days. But anyway, I sure hope we can find a way soon to have government that represents more of us in the middle, rather than, it seems like the folks who are on the extremes dominate our politics these days. And that just doesn't seem like it has much of a future for us.
Yeah, and you and I have talked before and at lunch today about the primaries and how that works to, I'm not going to go in all of this, about how it keeps party members, representatives in line with the party line, for sure. It puts, anyway, I could go on a lot. I've read the Politics Industry, a book that I highly recommend, that does quite an analysis of the national picture with how the parties form a duopoly to run things to keep us divided. Yeah, so where was I here?
Well, the parties are controlled by the people who are the most extreme, and in many parts it seems like rural America, the only way you can win a primary is to be pretty much on the extreme fringe of either party. And so people who are moderate don't stand much of a chance in our system right now. So you were mentioning a measure that's going to be on the ballot in Oregon that I was a little bit out of date on. Is it Measure 117?
Yeah, I just learned about this week too.
Ranked choice voting. I'm going to encourage everyone to support that. I think that would be very helpful where, although it's mainly helpful in places where you have multiple candidates for a position. And, in our part of the country, we usually only have one person that files for, like a state representative or Senate seat, or for Congress, there's usually just one or two. Ranked choice voting, I think, will help overall. Open primaries would help even more. So those are a couple of concepts that I think are great.
Yeah, I would love to have more time to get into the open primary part. We're total agreement on that. So I just this morning too looked at some other data, and that we have what's called plurality voting. So whoever gets the most votes, say there are 3 candidates running, conceivably somebody with 35% of the vote could beat out the other 2 with 32, 33. And but maybe a better, more pertinent example, 2022, our gubernatorial election. We had Tina Kotek, definitely on, I'd say, liberal side, and we had Christine Drazen on the Republican side, and then we had 3 other candidates, 2 of whom between them got like 1%, but there was Becky Smith, who got non-affiliated got 8 or 9% of the vote.
Which is enough to be a spoiler.
Right.
And so if we had ranked choice voting, we would know better how those voters would come down if they could select as a second choice for who they would support.
You know, this occurred to me. I'm going to propose something here. I'm not sure if this is true, but if everybody voted, like 50% of everybody voted for Tina Kotek, and the other 50% exactly voted for Christine Drazen, and everybody put Becky Smith down as their second choice, I think Becky Smith would be the governor. I don't know.
No, the way that would work is that anyone who voted for Becky Smith, those votes would be thrown out as their first choice. And then the second choice that the Becky Smith voters picked would go to either Drazen or Kotek, and could put one of them over the top and secure them as governor.
Well, rats, I liked my version better. We got some laughter from the audience here, all three of them. Okay. Anyway, this is both of these issues are, I think, important ones that would really help moderate our political situation. Now, Todd,
no, I was just going to say it's a little bit complicated, the ranked choice voting, and especially the ranked choice voting system that they're employing this coming fall in Portland in the mayor's race. I mean, I've looked at that and I thought I understood ranked choice voting, but even that seems to be a little bit baffling. And I think that throws people. It might cause people to react in a negative way against the concept of ranked choice voting just because it's different and it seems a little more complicated, and maybe it is a little more complex than just a simple, whoever gets the most votes, but it will ensure a more fair race that more people can support. It would stop people from feeling like their votes don't count anymore. If they don't vote for, either the Democrat or the Republican, often people feel like they're throwing their vote away to vote for a minor party candidate. So ranked choice voting would eliminate anyone having to feel like their vote doesn't count anymore.
Any number of ranked choice voting systems. I've done a little bit of study on this, and in fact, so new into the study I've kind of confused myself, but there is one system called STAR, S-T-A-R, and I forget exactly what it stands for, but there it's kind of like you could put down 3 people in second choice and one first, and it makes the best of it some way. So it kind of takes any complication out of it, although, as I understand it, once people have done ranked choice voting once, it's pretty easy to understand. And the power of it, I think, more than makes up for it.
Yeah, I think it's just one of those things where once you've done it once, you start to feel okay about it, and eventually I think people will see that it's really the sensible thing to do.
And thinking about somebody winning with 35% of the vote is not very democratic.
Asking for trouble.
Yeah. Okay, well, I want to thank Mr. Kepple for coming in today. Any final comments you would like to offer about yourself, Mr. Sugarman, Klamath County?
Well, you and I do go back a ways, Chuck, from when you were working for the county, and I was working for the newspaper, and so I've been able to watch you some years, and we've had interaction over the years, and always encouraged by your efforts, especially in these last few years, to keep the discussion going, that we've got to remember how to be civil, how to be friendly, how to interact with people that we disagree with without coming to blows over it. It's really important work that you're doing, so thank you for your efforts.
Well, thank you, and it was a hard path to get here. I spent a long time being angry and realized somewhere along the line that it just makes things worse. You're not going to influence anybody by telling them how to damn well get it right and do it this way. You're going to have to listen to them and actually learn a lot from other people too, and their perspectives and stories especially. But Thank you, Todd. I appreciate that. I got some hair standing up on my neck. Thank you, and thanks for listening. Remember ranked choice voting, and sometime later talk to Todd about primaries. He has some experience in that. Remember about making a contribution to the Klamath Foundation, the Community Foundation.
That's it.
Okay, and of course you can help us here at kivascorner.com. We have a website that has some information like we've talked about here with Kiva, and some other content and this interview. So we'll be letting you know when and if we become a private nonprofit, and try to get some public events going in terms of civil discussions on issues such as rural law enforcement and health, emergency health care in rural areas. Something we're thinking about doing. So thank you, Todd, and
Thank you,
appreciate
Chuck.
your support to the community.
All right, we'll be seeing you.
Okay.